So let me read you the summary of where we are right now. This is Professor A talking at the beginning of the appendix. I really like Professor A because he's me. I hadn't intended to reveal the identity of people until 50 years after, but it's 47 years after. So I will tell you that Professor A is me and Professor B is Alan Godhealth. I'll give you that much. Professor A says, I want to check my understanding of your theory of concept formation. What I would like to do is give a brief summary of the process and ask you to comment as to whether I understand it correctly. All right, she says. First of all, I'd like to distinguish the objectivist position on concept formation from the Aristotelian position. According to the Aristotelians, there is some common element or essence which is identical in all the concretes of a given kind. And concept formation is simply the selective awareness of that element. So for Aristotle, the manness of men would be something that you would merely focus on selectively. And the manness of each man is the same. The objectivist position is that the manness of each man is specific, or not the manness, but the characteristic of rationality. As I understand it, each person's form of rationality has specific measurements. And my rationality or manness would not be literally identical to someone else's. But what we do in concept formation, through a process of measurement omission, is integrate the concretes according to their common attributes. Now, as I understand it, the measurement omission is accomplished by means of differentiation. Take the concept of blue. You begin as a child with two blue objects of different shades, perhaps, so their specific color measurements differ, and say one red object. And then you are able to see that the two blues belong together as opposed to the red. Whereas if you just consider the two blues by themselves, you would only be aware of the differences between them. And then you wouldn't see them as similar until you contrasted them to the red. She says, that's right. Then I say, now the heart of the matter that I want to check on is this. Is it that by means of this differentiation, you see blueness as a range or category of measurements within the conceptual common denominator color? That's the way that I understand it. You see the blue of this object and the somewhat different blue of that other object. Both have specific measurements, but those measurements fall into one category as opposed to the measurements of some red object which fall outside that category. So that the omission of measurements is seeing the measurements as falling within a given range or category of measurements. And she interrupts to say, yes. And then I continue, within the conceptual common denominator. She had said yes before I could get that out. And then she says, yes, that's right. Now, the essential thing there is that you cannot form a concept by integration alone or by differentiation alone. See, I only mentioned differentiation. You need both, always. You need to observe similarities in a certain group of objects and differences from some other group of objects within the common standard or kind of measurement, so that you could differentiate a red cup from two blue cups, but you couldn't differentiate a blue cup from a heavy stone. There is no conceptual common denominator in that kind of distinction. Does that answer your question? Yes, I say. Then she continues, there's one thing I want to correct you on, unless it was just foreshortening. You said that manness consists of rationality. Don't ever forget the full definition is rational animal. Otherwise, you may give the impression that rationality is the equivalent of the concept man. So let's stop there. And there we have her endorsing what I've been saying, and I want to add one other thing that I didn't pull out of this approach. Why do the two things that are near look like they belong together, look the same compared to the one that's far? Now you may think, well, it's obvious. I mean, they just do look like they're close, and this looks like it's far. There's a principle behind it. It's a principle I call consciousness being a difference detector. So what you have here is two sets of differences. The difference between the A and the B, which is small, and the difference between both of them and the C, the foil, which is huge. You set it up to make it huge. If it isn't, you can't really see a similarity. So the bigger difference is what consciousness goes to. And in comparison, the little difference, you respond to, well, that's no difference at all. The big difference swamps the little difference and makes it appear as similarity, not difference. So by the standard of this difference, this ain't a difference. There's no difference here. This is difference. You want difference? Here's difference. This isn't difference. That's the way your consciousness responds because it's attuned to differences. It's a difference detector. It's a discriminator.